Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, CIFF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Aaron Spears. And Aaron, there are so many excellent films in this festival that speak to issues of identity in ways that are personal and compelling.
I've found that to be true as well, Dee, especially in the film we're discussing on this episode of CIFF Speaks. It is Mama Bears. It is a perfect example of what you're talking about. And joining us now is the director of that film, Daresha Kai.
Daresha, it's good to have you with us on CIFF Speaks. I wanted to start before the film we're going to talk about, Mama Bears, begins. You were working on a short film about Kimberly and Kai Shapley of Pearland, Texas. I'm wondering how you originally connected with them and their story.
I first came to know about Kimberly and Kai through an article in the Huffington Post when she was talking about her journey from Tea Party Republican to LGBTQ activists. And she mentioned the Mama Bears. And that was the spark that started my interest in the Mama Bears, because she said that there were over 2,000 moms in the group, the private online community, who helped her become an ally and an advocate. And I was deeply intrigued, and that set me off on a 5-year journey.
Wow. And you submitted that short and got accepted to an ACLU series on transgender rights. How did people respond to that short film?
Well, I submitted the idea to ACLU, and then they commissioned the film. And the film has been amazingly well received. It has won 2 Webbies and an Emmy, and it has been seen where it lives on YouTube over 4 million times. So that's been amazing. Yeah, and if you read the comments, just a few of the comments beneath the video on YouTube, you see that it has opened a lot of hearts and minds. So I'm very proud of that.
That is so great to hear of positive comments on YouTube.
Yeah, there's some naysayers in there, but the bulk of them are very positive. You know, the people
Good.
saying, when I first started watching this, I didn't know anything about trans kids, or I thought this about trans people, or blah, blah, blah. And people being like, and I'm rooting for Kai, and I love Kai, and this has changed me.
Good.
So, it doesn't get any better than that as a filmmaker.
Very, very true. And then, so you also included some of Kai and Kimberly's footage in Mama Bears, but then also expanded that out to 2 other families, the Cunninghams of Oklahoma City and the Morrises of Rancho Cucamonga, California. What was it about those family stories that compelled you as a filmmaker? Like, I also need to document their journey.
Well, Sarah Cunningham is actually the first Mama Bear I ever shot with. She was actually, when I first reached out, so once I read that article, I reached out to the organizers of a couple of these private online Facebook groups and asked them if they would help me connect with Mama Bears, because I wanted to see if there was a movie to be made. And they connected me with, basically I sent an email and they sent it to their community, and about 20 different Mama Bears responded. Oh. So that's when I kind of knew that I was making a documentary. And Liz Dyer, who's in the film, who runs one of those groups, told me that Sarah Cunningham was on her way to New York, where I was living at the time, on her first Free Mom Hugs tour. And, there was no way I was going to miss that if at all humanly possible. Because, it was like, Santa Claus was coming to my house, right? And so I scrambled together some money. Actually, what happened was I mentioned it to a dear friend of mine who is LGBTQ. And as soon as I told him about the Mama Bears, he burst into tears, because his own mom had shunned him because she was a Jehovah's Witness when he came out. She shunned him. Mm-hmm. And he understood instantly the power of this particular story, the potential power of the story, because it was just in my mind at the time. And he offered me money so that I could shoot with Sarah and create a sample that we could then use to fundraise for the rest of the film. So I didn't answer your question. Sarah was someone that I could see, even before she could see, who was going to make big waves, who was going to bring about change. I saw her as a game changer. Before she even, so on that first tour, she hadn't even incorporated as a 501c3 yet. The idea hadn't fully landed, but I could see it. I could see what was coming. I had no idea she was going to go viral twice during the course of the filming of the movie, but I knew she was going to hit hard because what she was doing was coming from the heart, you know?
Yeah.
And what I look for in people that I want to make movies about are people who are honest and forthright and articulate, can share their stories, want to share their stories. Mm-hmm. And basically they're people that I fall in love with because they're such badasses.
And the same thing happens, I think, for people who view this film. We've been sort of dancing around Mama Bears, but I want to have you lay out what the group is for those who haven't heard of them yet and how they live their purpose.
So these are women, some of whom come from very conservative Christian backgrounds, not all of them, but some of them, a lot of them come from these backgrounds. And they are women who have decided to dig into their beliefs and examine them more deeply so that they can understand why they believe what they believe. And sometimes they wind up, leaving the church because they love their kids. So love compels these moms to transform themselves into warriors of love. So they have formed these support groups, these online private support groups to help each other on the journey towards acceptance, and they have developed they have many subgroups now. They've been around a little over 10 years. And so they now have groups called Mama Bears to the Rescue. They have groups that focus on moms with trans kids, moms with gender fluid kids. There are dad groups as well. I mean, it's just grown so much. When I first started the film, there were 2,000 moms, and now there are over 32,000 moms.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
So that's the Mama. And their goal, their mission is to make the world a kinder and safer place for the LGBTQ community. And so that's what they're out there doing. They're writing letters. They're sending, they're marching in protests and pride parades. They're handing out hugs. They're out there in these streets making a difference.
Yeah. And the hugs got to me too, because they seem to be so necessary. I mean, it's not something you would think of off the bat that this is something that somebody's been craving maybe all their life, but you show in the film that it is. It's such a key element of who they become.
Yeah. And so, human touch is so important for all of us. They've done studies and they found that babies can't survive. You can give them all the food and water and clean clothes and shelter in the world, but if you don't touch them, if you don't hug them, if you're not affectionate with them, they don't thrive. They just don't thrive. So humans need physical contact. And a lot of the people that the film really touches and impacts are those whose families have abandoned and rejected them. And so there's a point in the movie where Sarah talks about hearing these horror stories, right, of people. And I heard a lot of horror stories in the process of making films, like a guy whose parents came to pick him up from his freshman year in college. And on the drive home, he told them he was gay, and they pulled over and put him out on the side of the road, and he didn't see them again for years. Jeez. That's the kind of thing that happens, And so these are the kind of stories that she heard of people whose parents, rejected them outright and, condemned them. There was a guy whose parents sent a black wreath to his job in honor of their dead son when he came out to them. I mean, this is what's happening. And so it's really important to understand what these hugs mean to people, just what the existence of the Mama Bears means, It's everything.
From the filming perspective, I was wondering the logistics of filming. Like, this is a massive, and as you said, even just as you were documenting them, just exploding in population, like the community here with the Mama Bears. So were you just kind of crisscrossing the United States, visiting each city to get the interviews?
Yes, I was crisscrossing the country. I was in their homes, at the pride parades, a lot of our budget went towards travel. We would bring our DP with us. And then we pick up a sound person and a PA in the cities that we shot in.
Oh, okay.
And we would return again and again to visit our people. So we shot with Kimberly and Kai in Pearland, Texas. And then they moved to Austin and we shot with them in Austin, Texas. And even before they moved to Austin, we shot with them in Austin because they were doing advocacy work in Austin. So, you know, I've spent a lot more time in Texas than I ever dreamed I would. But this is what happens. I spent a lot of time in Oklahoma City, Sarah, you know, it was just, you just don't know where a movie's going to take you, right?
Right.
But yeah, I was there for almost all of the footage that's in the film, except the Nashville Mama Bears meetup, because I was filming something else. I was filming at the Edmond Pride. And so I had to send another team out to document that. But everything else, I'm in the room.
All right. Well, then also, I guess the natural follow-up to that is, especially in the world of documentaries, when do you know you've got what you need for the documentary? Because this was like you said, it was several years. So like when you're like, okay, I think we've got a handle on it, footage-wise.
Well, part of it is you run out of money.
Well,
that's when you know you're done.
That's when you know you're done.
Yep.
But in these particular stories, I think it was really just knowing that I had an arc for each character, for each person in the film. I had a beginning, a middle, and an end that would work as a story, you know. And that was it. That's when I decided, okay, well, I mean, and to be honest with Tammy, because she was the last person that we found, we still had plans to shoot with her when COVID hit, which is why you see some scenes with Tammy staring off at the cross or walking through the college by herself.
Oh yeah.
COVID.
Right.
You know, we had to get creative.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, but they were great scenes though, because it was contemplative and it made sense for the narrative. It didn't even occur to me like, oh, they can't be around people right now.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that either.
Yeah, no, excellent.
But I want to go back to something you said. You had an arc for each character. Does that mean you wrote out what you thought the story was going to be, or did you see the arc as you were filming it?
It's a little bit of both. So as we're filming, I'm creating index cards for the scenes that we're filming, and we have a big board and we put the cards up and we can see each character's basically story arc. And then in terms of editing, we edited them separately so that we could see, you know, what was missing, what was needed, what was working, what wasn't working. And then we put them together, right? Because they're three separate stories. They're connected, right? They're very much connected. They're three separate journeys. And we wanted to make sure that nobody got shortchanged.
And it is clear that they're connected. I wanted to have you talk about some of the struggles that the families you filmed had in common.
It's interesting. Every single person at some point said these words. I thought I was the only fill in the blank, the only mom of a trans kid, the only Christian gay person, the only whatever it was, right? So what I've learned is that one of the biggest problems for these families is isolation, that they're disconnected from, you know, when you grow up in an evangelical community, you live in a bubble, you know, and so you do think you're the only person, because you may look around, and even if there is another queer person in that bubble, they're hiding and pretending not to be queer as well, right? Mm-hmm. So you look around, you don't see anybody that looks like you. So that was one of the things. And then it always struck me that both Tanita and Sarah basically went fetal when their kids came out, right? They went to bed and cried for days, right? Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot, that people just break down because it's a loss. I think even for queer parents, if their kid comes out queer, because your first directive, your prime directive as a parent is to protect your kid. And the minute they come out as anything other than cisgender hetero, you know there's going to be some struggle involved, and no parent wants to see their kids suffer, right? So even if you're affirming and you're gay and don't have any issues with human sexuality being, you know, diverse, you still have that, oh, my poor kid, right? So there's that's universal, I think, to every parent, right? And yeah, I just feel like their stories are very, very similar. And the stories of the three different families that we picked are pretty universal, you know?
Yeah, I would agree.
I kind of want to go back to what you were saying about the editing, how you edited each individual section of the movie on its own, which just that cracked it open for me. Because as I was writing in my notes, it was like the balancing act of tones and the three narratives you have in this film, the emotional ups and downs. It felt like it's a very emotional ride, but like I never felt confused or lost. Like you kept the audience very grounded and connected with each story. And so I wanted to kind of ask you, besides putting them all separately and then kind of fixing them together, what was your editing process to kind of keep that all balanced once you were shuffling them all together?
I have to give a shout out to my incredible editing team, Hajar Salem, Kelly Creedon, Ileana Garcia. Especially Kelly, she is a master at transitions. The transitions, she always brought you back first to locale, even without, so the first time you see each family, you see a big graphic that says where they are. But after that, there's visual cues to tell you where they are. Like with Kimberly, there was a recurring theme of wind chimes and Texas flags, right? Yeah. And so you see one of those wind chimes and you're like, oh, we're back in Texas, right? With Tammy, there were these visuals of Rancho Cucamonga and these houses with all the little roofs that look alike. And you knew exactly where you were because she set it up. And then every time you came back, I was like, but it wasn't a big deal. You know, it was just a visual thing that you saw. And then we would go right into the scene, but it was enough to ground you in a new locale, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing that she did. And then I think, you know, we had a lot of conversations around whose story was telling what aspect of the journey, whether or not we had given enough context for you to understand where they were coming from. So for example, there's Kelly added that moment where Kimberly says, if you took this kind of Christian and this kind of Christian and put them in a paper bag and shook them up, you would have me, right? Because it tells you exactly who this woman is. And if you are from that community, it also fills in a lot of blanks for you, right? So we had conversations about, okay, we need to establish each one of these characters up front and what their religious background is. So we know where they're coming from. And we need to know what the stakes are for them. So we had a lot of conversations around, and then also we talked a lot about, are these people, have we contextualized enough, like the whole guilt aspect, right? Because each mom feels guilty about how she reacted when the kid came out, right?
Yeah.
And have we given them enough opportunity for them to talk about, you know, like Kimberly talks very candidly about spanking Kai, right? And you can see the regret on her face, right? You can, and then later she gets to apologize to the LGBTQ community in general, right?
Oh yeah.
She does it twice. She does it at the Equality Texas press conference, and then she does it when they win the award, right? She says, you guys were standing up for Kai when I was on the other side. So we wanted to make sure that the audience understood that, yes, these women they were harsh, they were rejecting, they were non-loving to their kids in the moment, but they came around and it was a journey and they regretted the past, you know? So it was important to just sort of make sure those pieces were in each story. And I don't know, then we just kept tweaking it until we thought, oh, okay, this makes sense. This kind of works. I hope it works for other people.
Right, because after a while, you may be too close to it to know. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes. After a while, not only are you too close, you're too tired of it.
Good point.
Yes, you done seen the movie 11,000 times, okay? And you're just like, please, let this work.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, I got to tell you, it does. You mentioned guilt in terms of the moms, but I was thinking of Tammy Morris as a gay woman who was deep in her faith. She felt guilt for feeling what she felt and tried to deny it for a long time. It seemed like she had just a passing relationship to the Mama Bears, but it led her to another organization that I found interesting, the Reformation Project. Did you know about them before you got into this project?
No, I learned about them during the course of making the movie. And Tammy, it's interesting. So I found Tammy through the Mama Bears group. she was posting in the group. And I actually had been looking for a Black family, a Black mom from the very beginning, because it's really important to me that we have these kind of conversations within the Black community, right? And I was not going to make this movie without a Black family. And I was looking and looking and looking. And unfortunately, most of the mama bear groups are pretty white, you know, which is something that we need to address as we move forward. So I kept trying to find a mama bear. And then I finally saw this post from Tammy, and I was like, hey, hi, how are you? Are you a mama bear? And she's like, no. But she wasn't a mama bear, but she started telling me this incredible journey that she had been on. And she said, you know, well, my mom is conservative Christian, but she loves and supports me. And I said, well, you think your mom would be willing to participate to let people know that you don't have to agree with your kids in order to love them? And so that's how we pitched the film to Tanita. And that was why she came on board initially, because that was a message that was vitally important to her, that she wanted out in the world. You could love your kids no matter what, right? Yeah. Right. So I'm so grateful to her for doing that, even though, you know, she got pushback from the church. And that was important. That was really important. And also, she, for me, represents where most families will probably land, right? I don't expect all parents to run out and become advocates and allies and start marching in the streets and marching in parades and sending letters and all the things that the mama bears do. But I do want them to know, you don't have to do all that. You just have to love your child. Yeah. You just have to not reject them. Don't kick them out. Don't put them out on the side of the road, right, at 18. Take care of them. That's your first responsibility, right? That's what Jesus told you to do. Love God and love each other.
Yeah, that was an interesting aspect too, that the women found another way to approach their faith as they went on this journey. It actually opened their minds to in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I think, you know, you can't go on this journey without some transformation, right? It requires that you reevaluate your life. Okay. It requires that you reevaluate your beliefs. It requires that you grow. So love can do that. Love can make you change. We know when we fall in love with people, we change. So if you love someone since birth, why wouldn't you change for them?
Well, and speaking of that growth and that change that comes with the love, that puts you as the director and as the documentarian here, I thought, in kind of an interesting position. How, in the process of making this, how did you build the trust with the participants? Because you're capturing some very raw emotions and growth. How did you go about building the trust with everybody that participated in the documentary in order to record such intimate and even confessional moments that you've got on film here?
I think that it's a number of things that make people trust me. One is that I'm an honest person, that I'm forthright. The first thing I told all of them is that, listen, I'm not Christian, but I do understand the power of storytelling and the power of love. And that's what I want to promote, is what you're doing is heroic to me. And that's the light in which I want to portray you, right? And so they're like, oh, well, you believe in love? We're on, right? The other thing I think is that I kind of instinctively practice deep listening. Right. And so when you do that, when you really, really listen to people, it gives them space to open up. Right. I'm not looking at a list of questions and now checking them off. You know, I'm having a conversation with the people that I'm interviewing. And I am deeply empathetic, very compassionate person. And so if they start to get emotional, I start to get emotional. If they start to cry, I start to cry. Which gives them permission to cry and get emotional, because the director's all over there with snot coming out her face. Why shouldn't I? You know?
Yeah, that's great.
I think those tears of empathy go a long way, you know, to just giving people the space and the comfort to open up. You know.
Yeah, listening is very powerful as a way to just say, it's okay to tell your story. I'm interested, I'm invested.
Yeah, when I worked on, I spent a lot of years as a television producer, and I produced TV in Spanish and English. And I worked on The Voice in Spanish for kids, La Voz Kids. And we used to do these interviews where they would tell us their stories. I had like 9 kids, and about 7 of them broke down during the interview, at which point the executive producer came running in the room. She's like, "We need to know what you're doing. This is magic." That's TV.
I love it. The kid whisperer.
Yeah.
You have you were talking about some of the things you've done. You have a really interesting body of work. And I was noticing a previous feature film of yours, which was an award-winning documentary titled Chavela, which debuted in 2017 at the Berlin Film Festival. It made me wonder, as a filmmaker, what attracts you to take on a project? What does it have to have before you say, yes, I will do that?
I am deeply intrigued by game changers, right? People who go in and bust up systems, people who change things, who transform things, whether it's politically or musically or socially. I like people who are badasses and who they don't leave the world the way they find it. They leave it better, right? And so for me, Chavela Vargas was a person like that. She was just, oh Lord, she was so strong and so powerful and so fully present, right? And she was iconoclastic. She was she was one of a kind, you know, and she just really, really, really changed things. And that's what I love. I love people who are strong and, you know, not always strong. I mean, she was an alcoholic. She lost 12 to 15 years of her career to alcoholism, right? So it's not about being strong all the time, but it is about the journey. And it is about having a vision. And it is about, I don't know, just for me, what I'm really intrigued by are people who are willing to bare their souls and help other people. I have to be in love with the storyline. I have to be in love with the people at the center of the story in order to dedicate 5 years of my life to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of everything.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I'm curious what or who you're in love with now. I mean, is there something that you're working on that's going to take you to another place?
Yes, actually, I am. I shot another documentary already, and I'm looking for the money to finish it, about Cliff Albright and Latasha Brown, who are the co-founders of the Black Voters Matter Fund. And I traveled with them as they helped flip Georgia from red to blue in 2020 and 2021. Nice. So I'm in love with them now. They're total badasses.
Yep.
Good. I look forward to seeing that. But thank you so much for being with us now and for this film too. It's really just a remarkably touching and triumphant in some ways story. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an honor.
Our guest has been Daresha Kai, the director of the documentary Mama Bears. That film will be screened Wednesday, April 6th at 5 p.m. in the Mimi, Ohio Theater at Playhouse Square. You can also watch it as part of CIFF 46 Streams, which runs online from April 10th through the 17th. Find out more about what's happening at the film festival by logging on to clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
With thanks to our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. And thanks to you for listening to CIFF Speaks.